Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan Grech, and today a topic I do get asked quite a lot about, and that's how to get sponsors to do what I do, to drive around the world in my vehicle. And instead of just making it specific to what I'm doing, this applies quite broadly to anything you're interested in doing. So how do you go about getting sponsors to do something that you love, whatever that happens to be? If it's something you've wondered about, you'd like to learn more, stick around. I'm going to get into all the details right now. If you're interested in attracting sponsors to whatever it is you're doing, the first thing you have to realize is that it's all about what the brand wants or the company that you're trying to get sponsorship from, and it really isn't about what you want. And so the best example that I have of this is the fantastic book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If you haven't read this book, I'm going to throw a link down in the description. You really need to read it, not just for getting sponsors, but just for going about life. This is one of those books where every time I read it, I learn something new, and I vow that I should read it every year for the rest of my life. But anyway, there's this great example in the book where he gives a sample where someone's trying to get a job as a bank teller, and they write this letter all about them. So if I was to give you the example for me, I could say, I drove all the way to Alaska, I drove all the way to Argentina, I drove all the way around Africa, I'm this big hero overlanding guy, give me free stuff. And you can kind of see that's never going to work in the real world. That's just not how this goes. So instead of focusing on what you are or what you've done or what you're planning on doing, it's really important to turn it around and focus on what are you going to provide to the brand or the company that you're looking to get sponsorship from. So instead of saying, I drove from Alaska to Argentina, I should reword that and say, I generated this amount of media coverage, this many pages in print magazines, this many views on my websites, my stories got covered in this and this and this big publication. Talk about all of the media attention that I generated from doing that trip. That's what companies are looking for at the end of the day. And that's the next fundamental thing we have to talk about is companies really want media exposure. Because at the end of the day, they want to sell their products. That's why they exist. That's why they may potentially think about sponsoring you. So when they say, okay, we're going to give you a free so-and-so, how is that going to help us sell that to more people? And the number one way you're going to do that is by saying, I'm getting this amount of media coverage for what I'm about to do. So therefore, this many people are going to see me using that thing. And how do you go about getting media coverage? Well, that could be a whole video in itself, but really what you have to do is just slowly work up to it. You can't expect to get published in Nat Geo or the biggest magazines for your first attempt. So the best advice I can give you is start practicing right now. I blogged for 2 years on the Pan American Highway before I ever wrote an article for a print magazine. All of that time I was practicing my photography, I was practicing my writing until it slowly got good enough that I managed to get a few articles in a few smaller magazines. Then I kept practicing, I wrote my first book, I blogged even more, and about 5 years later, I started getting published in bigger magazines. My photography was improving as I took courses and talked to people who are experts in the field. And so slowly, I started to be able to get relationships with magazine editors where I could get my stories published. And so that now is a really big way that I generate media attention for what I'm doing, that I can go to potential sponsors and say, hey, look how much attention my trips generate. Another really big fundamental that we need to talk about is not just to say you're going to do stuff, but actually do stuff. I'm sure there are thousands of people out there who have ideas of driving the Pan American Highway or, exploring the Darien Gap or doing something unique like that. And those are really great plans, but I think these days, lots of brands and companies, they're a bit sick of hearing about all of these ideas, and they're way more interested in people that actually follow through and actually do it. So I hate to be so blunt, but if you've never taken a big trip, if you've never driven up to Alaska and kind of blogged and taken great photos, documented it, written some magazine articles, then telling someone that you're going to drive all the way to South America, they're going to say, Yeah, but like prove it to us. We've never seen you do that. It's all well and good to say you're going to do it, but we're really interested in actual results. Like show us, give us a demonstration. So I actually, when I drove Alaska to Argentina, I didn't even approach a single company for sponsorship. I just did that trip all by myself, all my own money, all my own gear. Nobody else contributed a cent or any gear at all because I had no reputation, because I'd never done anything before. When it came time for the Africa trip, I did approach quite a few companies, and there were some that gave me some discount, some did supply me some products entirely on sponsorship, and then quite a few others, they never even replied, or they just said, no, we're not interested in that. So with my reputation, I was able to get some companies on board. And now for my new trip, I am working hard again to try and get some companies on board. But it is a factor where you have to build on your reputation. You have to continually prove you can actually do what you said you're going to do. You can get media attention. You do take decent photos and you do write articles. And there's no doubt about it, all those things are hard work. And that's why lots of brands are going to be hesitant if you send them this great spiel where you talk about driving the Darien Gap, because lots of people talk about doing it, not so many people actually follow through. Another thing we need to talk about, and I think this has worked really well for me, is it's worth trying to do something a little bit unique or a little bit different. And again, if you're setting out to drive through Death Valley, the Lippincott Mine Road or something like that, I mean, honestly, thousands of people do it every month. It's probably not the kind of thing that brands are going to be super excited about, and they're going to supply you thousands of dollars worth of equipment to go and do that trip. Again, if you're going up to Alaska, I mean, tons of people do it. The highway normally is choked with RVs, so it's not kind of a crazy thing to do or out there. But if you said, hey, we're going to try and drive the North Canal Road, we're going to get as far as we can on this road that's basically been abandoned for a long time. Okay, that's starting to be interesting. We're going to go down and explore the Darien Gap and try to drive from Panama to Colombia, first time it's been driven in a couple of decades or something. Okay, yeah, brands might want to get behind that. So there's kind of a level, I think, of saying, I'm doing something that really isn't common, or is uncommon enough at least that magazines are going to be interested in running your story. You're probably going to get some good views across social media, things like that. So it is sometimes about how much media buzz are you going to generate. And this kind of goes along with, if you're just building a show vehicle, this is kind of that thing. If you're just going to build a JK Wrangler on 37-inch tires and you expect it to be a big attention grabber at SEMA or Overland Expo, a lot of brands are going to say, yeah, that's kind of been done to death. And that's why we see so many vehicles that are kind of like crazy or over the top, or they're painted in some sparkly reflective color or something, simply because they're attempting to generate more eyeballs. More eyeballs means more media attention, means chances of sponsorship goes up. Another one we should talk about is realistic expectations for what you're aiming for. So as I said, from my first trip, I didn't actually get anything on sponsorship. For my second trip, a few companies were willing to give me discounts. So right away you can see, it's not like you can just go to a big brand name company and say, hey, give me $10,000 because I want to drive to Alaska. That just isn't real life, and that's not something that's going to happen. But if you put together a really comprehensive plan and you say, I've driven to Alaska in the past and I wrote this in this magazine article, and I generated these amount of views on social media, you say, now I'm gearing up to drive the Pan American Highway. If you would like to supply this piece of gear, I can write review articles, I can put it on my social media, I'll have the vehicle on display at these events at the end of the trip, so on and so forth. That's the kind of thing where companies will be like, okay, we might be willing to supply a piece of kit for free, or we might be willing to supply it on discount. And so, you get it at cost price or something. So it's going to make your trip a little bit cheaper. But that is the kind of realistic thing that you're going to be working with. And it's worth realizing you're not just going to start out asking for money off the bat. You're going to start out potentially with some discounted products, and you might slowly build up as your reputation grows. The next thing we should talk about is getting rejected or simply getting no reply at all. And I can tell you from experience, it happens all the time. And it's really important to remember, these companies are super busy, they've got a lot going on. I'm willing to bet, in fact, I know one of the big brands in the off-roading industry, they get 20 sponsorship requests every single day of the year. So if they're getting 20 a day, maybe they're busy today, they're busy tomorrow, suddenly the next day they have 60 things to read through, to consider, to try and prioritize and try to reply to. I think it's just real life. There's going to be a ton that they never even get the time to reply to. And that happens to me all the time. Sometimes, whether it's a magazine article that I've written, or if I'm reaching out to a company, even just to say, hey, I'd be interested in having your product on this trip. Could you tell me more? You know, can we work together? I still get no reply. So that can happen, and I think it's something you have to be aware of and you have to kind of be ready for, so that you don't get upset or you don't have your heart set on some particular piece of kit, getting it for free and being a part of their SEMA display and touring. You know, if they're busy, if they've already organized something with somebody else, then they're just not going to be willing to work with you. And then the final thing that I think I should talk about is that it's important to be realistic and really think about the products that you're actually going to need and use for whatever you're doing. So I know a lot of people, they get really excited about the prospect of bolting on a whole bunch of stuff on their vehicle or having a whole bunch of gear to bring with them. But you have to remember, if you're getting this product on sponsorship, you've made an agreement where you will actually use the product, you'll demonstrate it, you'll talk about it to other customers. Chances are you'll get comments across social media, people asking you like, is it any good? All of that kind of stuff. So if it's a product that you don't genuinely need or you genuinely wouldn't have bought with your own money, then I really don't think you should try and get it on sponsorship. Or even if a company offers it to you, I don't think you should accept it, because you're just not being genuine and people are going to see right through that straight away. So I hope all of that information has been helpful, and I hope it gives you a lot of perspective into what's actually required and what goes into getting sponsors to do whatever it is you love doing. And as you can see, it is a lot of hard work. And I don't want to discourage you. If it's something you've always wanted to do, go for it. But it is reality that for the vast majority of people, they realize it's easier just to keep going to work for a little while longer and then just buy whatever product it is you are hoping to get on sponsorship. That's how most people actually go about it. The number of people that I've bumped into on the road who actually have sponsors, I can count on one hand. So it isn't a super common thing to do. This is more like if you want to build a show vehicle and just show it at all the Overland shows or SEMA or whatever. But if you really just want to get out and have adventures, getting sponsors isn't really the main way to go about it. So if it's been helpful, if this is useful to you, please do hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. There's always new videos coming out every Monday and Thursday to help you get out there on the road. The things you need to know to actually make it happen. So thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.